In the heart of a small southern town called Willow Creek, where the air always smelled of rain and magnolia blossoms, lived a girl named Mara Lewis. She wasn't like the other girls her age who spent their evenings talking on porches, braiding each other's hair, or gossiping at the corner store. Mara preferred silence. She would sit alone on the back steps of her small wooden house, watching the sun melt behind the trees, her eyes deep and far away, as though she were listening to something the world couldn't hear. Her mother, Clara Lewis, had died when Mara was 6. She drowned one stormy afternoon when her fishing boat capsized on Willow Creek Lake. Clara had been delivering fish to the nearby town, trying to earn enough to buy Mara her first pair of new shoes for school. The lake took her instead. After that, it was just Mara and her father, Ray Lewis, a man once strong, once proud, now hollowed by grief. Ray worked at the lumber mill outside town, and every night he came home smelling of sawdust and whiskey. In the beginning, he tried. He'd tell her stories before bed about how her mother could whistle better than the mockingbirds. But as the years dragged on, the stories stopped. The bottles multiplied. The laughter in the house disappeared. Sometimes, when the night was quiet enough, Mara could hear him muttering to himself from his room. "Clara, you left me," he'd whisper through tears. Then came the sound of glass shattering against the wall. People in Willow Creek pitied the Lewises. When Ray stumbled through Main Street on Saturday mornings, the old men outside the hardware store would shake their heads. "Poor man's just trying to forget," they'd say. "But that girl, she's the one paying the price." They weren't wrong. Yet Mara was not entirely alone. She had her grandmother Evelyn, whom everyone in town called Miss Evie. She lived on the edge of town in a creaky farmhouse surrounded by oak trees and blackberry bushes. Miss Evie was old, but her spirit was fierce and her eyes sharp as ever, even behind her gold-rimmed glasses. She was known for her stories, not the kind you'd find in books, but the kind that made people lower their voices when she spoke. Some said she could see things. Others said she had the gift, a soft word people in Willow Creek used when they didn't want to say magic. But what truly made her different wasn't her stories or her age. It was a small silver locket she wore around her neck, shaped like a heart and etched with faint floral patterns. Whenever the light hit it just right, it shimmered, not like normal metal, but like it had a pulse. Miss Evie had worn it since she was a girl. Some said it came from her mother, others whispered it had belonged to a woman who knew too much about dreams. Whatever the truth, Miss Evie guarded it fiercely. When Mara visited her after school, Miss Evie would sometimes take it off, polish it gently with a soft cloth, and smile. "This locket's been in our family for generations," she'd say. "It's seen things most eyes can't. It listens, child. And when the time's right, it speaks." Mara never understood what that meant, but she loved the way her grandmother's voice softened when she said it. Sometimes, Miss Evie would let her hold it. It was warm, even when it should have been cold. "Promise me something, sugar," she said one evening as they sat by the porch, fireflies dancing in the humid dusk. "No matter what life throws at you, keep your heart clean. Don't let the world harden it. Pain'll visit you, but don't you ever let it stay." Mara nodded, not fully understanding but feeling something stir inside her chest. At home, things grew worse. Her father had lost his job at the mill after missing too many shifts. He'd spend whole days lying on the couch, muttering about luck and ghosts. Sometimes he forgot to eat. Sometimes he forgot she was there. By 13, Mara learned to fend for herself. She washed clothes for neighbors, cleaned the churchyard, and sometimes helped at Miss Lila's diner after school. She wasn't paid much, but she learned how to cook biscuits that flaked perfectly, fried chicken crisp enough to sing when you bit it, pies that made people close their eyes in peace. Cooking gave her calm. It was her language when words didn't work. When she cooked, she felt her mother near. When she stirred, she imagined her grandmother's steady hands guiding her. And in those quiet moments, the noise in her life, her father's anger, the loneliness, the weight of missing, faded just a little. But the peace never lasted long. One muggy August night, thunder rolled in the distance as Mara stood by the stove frying catfish. Her father stumbled in, his eyes glassy, his shirt half-buttoned. He looked older than his years, broken in ways whiskey couldn't fix. "You're cooking again," he muttered. "For who, huh? For me? You think that makes a damn difference?" She didn't answer. He grabbed the plate from her hands and hurled it against the wall. The crash echoed through the house. "I lost everything because of your mama," he yelled, his voice slurred. "And now I'm stuck here with her shadow." Mara froze. Her throat tightened, her eyes burned, but she didn't cry. She just picked up the broken plate pieces quietly. That night, when he finally passed out on the couch, she packed a small bag, 2 dresses, her worn Bible, and the one thing her grandmother had given her the week before, the silver locket. Miss Evie had been sick then. Her breath came in rasps, her once strong hands trembling as she pressed the locket into Mara's palm. "When I go," she whispered, "you keep this close. It's more than a keepsake. It'll remind you who you are when the world tries to make you forget." Tears slipped down Mara's cheeks. "Don't talk like that, Grandma." "Hush," Miss Evie said with a weak smile. "Life'll test you, baby. It'll try to turn your heart to stone. Don't let it. You've got your mama's kindness and my stubbornness, that's a mighty mix." The next morning, Miss Evie was gone. Mara buried her under the oak tree behind the farmhouse. The townsfolk came with casseroles and sad smiles. Her father didn't show up. He was too drunk to stand. After the funeral, Mara stayed in the old house for a few days, sitting on the porch steps, staring at the empty rocking chair where her grandmother used to hum gospel tunes at sunset. It felt like the world had swallowed color. That evening, she opened the locket for the first time. Inside was a faded picture, her grandmother as a young woman, smiling beside a field of sunflowers. But something else caught her eye. On the opposite side of the locket, words were faintly engraved. "When the heart listens, light answers." She ran her thumb over them again and again, as though the meaning might rise from the metal. That night, as she fell asleep on the porch, she dreamed. She saw herself older, standing in a kitchen she didn't recognize, wide windows, copper pots, golden light. She was stirring a pot while people laughed in the background. And behind her, she saw a hand place the locket around her neck. She woke up breathless. The dawn was just breaking, the air cool and damp. She touched the locket. It was warm again. Mara didn't know what the dream meant. But for the first time in a long while, she felt something different from pain, hope. Days later, her father stumbled back to Miss Evie's farmhouse, smelling of alcohol and regret. He said little. Then, one afternoon, she overheard him on the porch talking to a stranger, a farmer from 2 towns over named Henry Cole. "Strong girl," her father slurred. "Hard-working. Can cook too." Cole grunted. "I could use help on the farm. My wife's been sick." They spoke in low tones. Then came the words that would change her life. $50 for the season, Cole said. Ray nodded, shaking the man's hand. "She's yours till Christmas." Mara's heart dropped. That night, she packed her things again, not because she wanted to go, but because she knew she had no choice. When dawn broke, the farmer's old truck rumbled into the driveway. Her father didn't come out to say goodbye. He just watched from the window, eyes glazed. As the truck rolled down the dusty road, Mara clutched the locket tight against her chest. In its silence, she thought she felt something, not words, not sound, just warmth, like a heartbeat. She looked out the window at the shrinking silhouette of her grandmother's house, then at the horizon ahead. Somewhere deep inside, a voice whispered, soft, steady, unyielding. "Don't let darkness make you forget who you are." And for the first time, Mara whispered back, "I won't." Sometimes, the hardest journeys begin not with footsteps, but with the courage to leave the broken pieces behind. Mara didn't know it yet, but the light she was searching for had been growing quietly inside her all along. The old truck rattled down the dirt road, coughing dust into the sunrise. Mara sat in the back, clutching her bag with both hands, her heart pounding. The air smelled of hay and gasoline. She didn't cry. She'd done enough of that already. Instead, she stared at the horizon and whispered under her breath, "I'll be okay." Henry Cole glanced at her through the rearview mirror. He was a large man, shoulders broad from years of work, his skin leathered from the sun. He didn't smile. His grey eyes were sharp, scanning the road ahead like it owed him something. Beside him sat his wife, Janet, a woman with a face carved from suspicion. Her hair was pulled tight into a bun, her lips pressed thin. When she looked back at Mara, her eyes didn't soften. "So that's the girl," Janet muttered. "Looks small for all the work you promised she could do." Henry grunted. "She'll grow into it. They said she can cook." Janet snorted. "Hope she can work harder than she looks." Mara said nothing. Her palms were slick with sweat, her fingers wrapped around the silver locket in her pocket. The Cole farm sat on the far edge of a sleepy town called Pine Hollow. It wasn't big, but it stretched wide, rows of corn, a chicken coop, a pig pen, and a 2-story farmhouse painted white once upon a time but now graying from neglect. Janet stepped out first when they arrived. "You'll sleep in the shed out back," she said briskly, pointing to a small wooden shack near the barn. "You'll fetch water from the well every morning, feed the chickens, help with cooking and cleaning, and stay out of my way." "Understood." Mara nodded. That was how her new life began. The days at the Cole farm were long and merciless. The sun rose early, the work started earlier. Mara's hands blistered from carrying buckets of water and scrubbing floors. Her back ached from bending over the garden rows, her fingers raw from plucking feathers. But the nights were worse. She'd lie awake on the thin mattress in the shed, listening to the crickets and the wind scraping against the roof. Sometimes she'd hear Janet shouting from the house. Sometimes she'd hear Henry's heavy footsteps storming across the porch. Loneliness was no longer a feeling, it was the air she breathed. One evening, after finishing her chores, Mara sat on the porch steps behind the shed and pulled out the locket. The metal glowed faintly under the moonlight, soft and silver, like it carried its own tiny sun. She opened it. Inside, the photo of her grandmother smiled up at her, gentle and sure. On the opposite side, the engraved word seemed sharper tonight, almost alive. "When the heart listens, light answers." She traced them with her thumb. "I don't know what to do," she whispered. "I don't even know who I'm supposed to be." A cool wind swept through the fields, rustling the corn like a whisper in reply. That night, she dreamed again. She was in the Cole's kitchen, but it looked different, brighter, filled with warmth. She saw herself stirring a pot while laughter echoed around her. Henry sat at the table, smiling. Janet was beside him, her eyes soft instead of hard. The air smelled like cornbread and honey. Then the image shimmered, and she saw her grandmother standing by the stove, humming an old gospel tune. "Mara," she said softly. "You were born to feed more than stomachs, child. You were born to feed hearts." When she woke, her cheeks were wet with tears. The dream stayed with her. The next day, when Janet barked orders and Henry scowled, she worked silently, but this time, she noticed things. The kitchen was dull, the food plain, the air heavy. Nobody smiled when they ate. That evening, when Janet left for the market, Mara took a chance. She gathered what little she could find, a few spices, a jar of honey, leftover chicken, some vegetables from the garden. She hummed the same tune her grandmother had sung in her dream and began to cook. She didn't have a recipe, just instinct. By the time Janet returned, the air in the house smelled like home, rich, warm, alive. "What's that?" Janet demanded, her voice sharp. "Dinner," Mara said quietly. Henry entered behind her, sniffing the air. His stomach growled audibly. "Smells good," he muttered. They ate in silence. Henry's spoon paused midair after the first bite. Janet tried not to show it, but her eyes widened slightly. "This," Henry began, clearing his throat. "This tastes like something I haven't had in years." Mara said nothing, just lowered her gaze. The next morning, Henry didn't send her to the fields. "Stay in the kitchen," he said. "Help Janet cook again." It became her new role. Each day, she cooked stews, cornbread, roasted vegetables, pies. But each night, before bed, she'd open the locket and wait. Sometimes, faint glimmers would appear inside, shapes, colors, the flicker of new ingredients she'd never used. At first, she thought it was her imagination. But when she followed those glimpses, her dishes turned out extraordinary. Soon, even Janet began to soften, though she hid it behind tight lips. "Where'd you learn to cook like that?" she asked one evening, not meeting Mara's eyes. Mara shrugged. "My grandma taught me." Janet nodded slowly, her expression unreadable. Days passed, and the household shifted. The boys, Eli, Sam, and Rory, began helping more. They joked with Mara, offered to fetch wood or peel potatoes. They'd sit around the kitchen table telling stories while she stirred the pots, their laughter bouncing off the walls. For the first time since her mother died, Mara felt something close to belonging. But peace never lasted long in her life. Janet's smile began to fade again. Each laugh from her sons felt like a betrayal. Each compliment Henry gave Mara burned like a wound. One evening, after seeing Eli hand Mara a carved wooden spoon, "For your magic hands," he'd said, Janet snapped. She waited until everyone went to bed. Then she stormed into the shed, slamming the door open. Mara jumped, clutching the locket to her chest. "You think you can come into my house and turn my family against me?" Janet hissed. "You're just a hired girl. Don't you ever forget that." "I never meant." "Quiet!" Janet's voice shook with rage. "You're leaving soon enough. I won't have you smiling at my sons or sweet-talking me my husband." Mara's throat tightened. "I wasn't." Janet snatched the locket from her hands. "What's this?" she sneered, holding it up. "Please, give it back," Mara begged. "It belonged to my grandmother." Janet studied it under the lantern light, her face hard. Then, to Mara's horror, she dropped it on the ground and stomped on it. The sound, that sharp, metallic crack, pierced Mara's chest. Janet turned and left without another word. When the door closed, Mara fell to her knees, gathering the broken pieces. The locket wasn't destroyed, but a hairline fracture ran across the front. She pressed it to her heart, whispering through tears, "I'm sorry, Grandma. I tried." That night, as she lay trembling on the floor, she felt warmth radiate from the locket again. It pulsed once, faint but alive. When she opened it, the engraving had changed. The words now read, "What breaks can still shine." She gasped, her tears blurring the letters. From that night on, something inside Mara hardened, not into bitterness, but strength. She worked harder. She smiled when she could. She poured every bit of her heart into her cooking. Henry noticed first. "Girl," he said one evening after supper, "you got gold in those hands." The boys nodded in agreement. "She makes food taste like Sunday morning," Rory said with a grin. Even Janet couldn't deny it. But her silence said more than words. Weeks turned into months, and rumors began to spread through Pine Hollow. "Henry Cole's got a cook who makes heaven out of leftovers," people whispered at the market. "They say her food can heal your mood." One day, a stranger arrived, a tall man in a grey suit carrying a sealed envelope. He introduced himself as a messenger from the governor's mansion. "The governor's tired of bland food," the man announced. "He's offering a reward to anyone who can bring him a meal worth remembering." Henry's eyes gleamed. "We'll go," he said, his voice firm. Janet frowned. "With her?" "With her," Henry replied. That night, as Mara packed a small bundle of clothes, she held the cracked locket close. "You've brought me this far," she whispered. "Don't stop now." The metal shimmered faintly, almost like it smiled back. At dawn, the truck roared to life once more. Henry sat behind the wheel, Mara beside him. The road stretched long and winding ahead, lined with oaks and morning mist. Neither of them spoke for a while. Then Henry said quietly, "You've got a gift, Mara. Don't let anyone make you ashamed of it." She turned to him, surprised. His face, usually hard, looked softer than she'd ever seen it. "Whatever happens," he continued, "remember where you came from, but don't let it chain you." Mara nodded slowly. "I won't, sir." He nodded back, eyes on the road. "Good girl." As the truck crossed the bridge into the next town, the sun broke through the clouds, washing the world in gold. Mara touched the locket and felt the same warmth spreading through her chest. She didn't know what waited ahead, only that something inside her had shifted. What once was broken now glowed. And in that glow, a quiet truth whispered through her heart. Sometimes, pain is not the end of your story, it's the fire that shapes your light. The governor's mansion stood on the highest hill in the county, a grand building of white columns and green shutters, the kind of place that made ordinary people whisper and straighten their clothes as they passed. Mara had never seen anything like it. The marble steps gleamed in the sunlight, and fountains sang in the courtyard like silver threads of sound. But all she could think was how far away this world felt from the red dirt road she came from. Henry parked the truck near the back entrance, where deliveries came and workers went. "Remember," he said, turning toward her. "You're here to cook. Nothing more, nothing less. Let them see what you can do, but keep your head low." Mara nodded. The locket, cracked but still shining faintly, rested against her heart like a heartbeat. Inside, the mansion buzzed with tension. Servants hurried up and down polished hallways, carrying trays of silverware, linens, and fresh flowers. The governor's wife, Mrs. Ellison, was throwing a luncheon for visiting officials, a test of prestige, taste, and pride. When Mara entered the kitchen, the head chef, Mr. Tully, looked her over with clear disdain. "This the girl from the farm," he scoffed. "We don't need charity help, Mr. Cole." Henry bristled. "She can cook better than anyone here." Tully laughed without humor. "We'll see about that." He tossed a knife onto the cutting board. "You, Amara, was it? You'll start with prep. And stay out of my way." She bowed her head. "Yes, sir." The morning passed in a blur of chopping, washing, and heat. The other kitchen hands avoided her at first, whispering behind her back. "She's just a farm girl. She probably burns water." But when Tully's stew burned, too much heat, too little care, Mara acted before she could think. She pulled the pot off the stove, salvaged what she could, and began stirring in herbs from the pantry. Tully spun around. "What do you think you're doing?" "Saving dinner," she said quietly. Henry, watching from the corner, smirked. When the stew was served to the governor's wife, she blinked in surprise. "Tully," she said, "this is marvelous. What did you change?" Tully opened his mouth, then hesitated. "Just a touch of spice." But Mara saw the flicker in his eyes, he knew whose hand had saved him. After that day, things shifted. The mansion kitchen became her new world, vast, loud, and full of challenge. Mr. Tully kept her on the lowest rung, but he began watching her work. She was quick, calm, and precise. Her dishes, no matter how simple, carried warmth. When the locket glowed faintly at night, she listened. It never spoke words, but somehow she felt guidance in her chest, small nudges that said add honey, or stir longer, or wait until the silence tastes right. Soon, servants started sneaking tastes of her food before serving. "This one's got sunshine in it," one said with a grin. "How you do that?" "I just listen," Mara replied. Her reputation grew quietly through the halls. By the end of the month, even Mrs. Ellison had noticed. "Who made the soup today?" she asked her husband one evening. "It reminded me of my mother's kitchen." "The new girl, I think," the governor replied absently. "Then promote her," Mrs. Ellison said simply. That's how Mara became assistant cook. But the higher she rose, the sharper Tully's eyes became. He couldn't stand seeing her name whispered with respect. His pride, the kind built from years of control, began to crack. One evening, as the staff cleaned up, he cornered her near the pantry. "You think you're some kind of miracle, don't you?" Mara froze. "No, sir. You think you're special because you can season a soup." His voice was low but bitter. "You're just lucky. Don't let that little glow fool you." She wanted to say she didn't think she was special. She wanted to tell him she was just grateful. But the words stuck in her throat. He leaned closer. "People like you burn out fast." When he left, the locket pulsed warm against her chest. She looked down and saw faint words shimmer across its crack. "What shines doesn't compete, it illuminates." She exhaled slowly, whispering, "Then I'll keep shining quietly." The next morning, Mrs. Ellison called a meeting. The governor had invited the mayor and his guests for a grand dinner. "This meal must be unforgettable," she said, her tone sharp. "Our reputation depends on it." Mr. Tully nodded. "I'll handle everything personally." But that night, as he tasted his own sauce, frustration twisted his face. It was bland, lifeless. And then he saw Mara, working silently at the corner table, humming softly as she mixed spices. He felt anger rise like bile. "Fine," he muttered. "Let's see how far her little miracle goes." He waited until she stepped away to fetch salt. Then, out of spite, he switched the jars on her table, salt for sugar, sugar for salt. When she returned, she didn't notice. She poured a pinch into her dish, stirred, and tasted. But then she frowned. Something felt wrong, off balance. She stared at the locket. The crack glowed faintly, a soft pulse. She closed her eyes, listened, then reached for another jar. Her fingers hesitated, then switched them back. She didn't know why. It just felt right. When the dishes went out that night, the dining hall filled with laughter and praise. "This meal," the governor declared, "tastes like home and celebration together." Tully's face turned pale. After dinner, Mrs. Ellison approached Mara privately. "My dear, where did you learn to cook like that?" Mara hesitated. "From my grandmother." She said cooking was a kind of prayer. Mrs. Ellison smiled softly. "Then you pray beautifully." The next week, the local newspaper published an article. "The mystery cook of Pine Hollow, a young woman's touch revives the governor's table." For the first time, Mara's name was printed in ink. She stared at it in disbelief. Her heart swelled, not from pride, but gratitude. When Henry returned to the farm, he brought her the paper. "You done good, girl," he said, eyes twinkling. "Didn't I tell you you had gold in those hands?" But he also warned, success can make folks jealous. "Keep your feet on the ground." She nodded. "I will." Still, jealousy had already taken root, and not just in Tully. Some of the kitchen staff began to whisper again. "She's the favorite now. She's just lucky. She's got something strange about her." They didn't see her sleepless nights, or how she whispered prayers over each dish. They didn't see her stare at the cracked locket until her vision blurred, asking, "What do I do next?" One evening, she overheard two maids talking in the corridor. "They say the locket she wears glows sometimes," one whispered. "Maybe it's witchcraft." Mara froze. The word hit her like ice. That night, she tucked the locket under her clothes, afraid someone might take it again. But the mansion's light was shifting. Mrs. Ellison still praised her, the governor still smiled, yet behind the curtains, resentment brewed. The following month, a new feast was planned, the biggest yet. Governors, senators, and even the press would attend. Mr. Tully, desperate to reclaim his pride, made his move. He cornered Mrs. Ellison the day before the banquet. He said, with respect, "That girl's been experimenting without permission. She's careless. If something goes wrong tomorrow, the whole house will be shamed." Mrs. Ellison hesitated. "I've never seen her fail." "Luck runs out," he said grimly. Reluctantly, she nodded. Then she'll assist only, nothing more. When Mara was told, she simply said, yes, But inside, she felt something ache. The next day, the kitchen bustled from dawn to dusk. Mara chopped vegetables, stirred sauces, cleaned pans, all while Tully took center stage. The air smelled rich and heavy, but somehow lifeless. When the first course went out, guests nodded politely but without joy. The second course earned a few murmurs of approval, nothing more. Then came the final dish, the dessert. The governor took one bite, frowned, and set down his fork. It's fine, he said flatly. But not memorable. A ripple of silence spread through the hall. In the kitchen, Tully's hands trembled. His lips pressed tight. Mrs. Ellison turned to Mara. Can you fix it? Mara blinked. Fix? You have 5 minutes, the governor's wife said. Do what you do. The kitchen froze. All eyes turned to her. Mara stepped forward, heart pounding. She grabbed honey, cinnamon, lemon, and a handful of wild berries. She moved like she was remembering, not inventing, every motion guided by instinct and memory. She stirred, tasted, adjusted, and stirred again. The locket glowed bright enough to light her face. When the dish was served again, the governor's eyes widened. Now this, he said, smiling, is extraordinary. The room erupted in applause. Tully stood in silence, defeated. Later that night, when everyone else had gone, Mara stayed behind to clean. She felt a strange stillness in the air, not pride, but clarity. She looked down at the locket, cracked but glowing softly, and whispered, I didn't do it alone. For a long moment, she just breathed, letting the truth sink in. Power, she realized, didn't come from being better than others. It came from serving with love, even when no one sees. The locket dimmed, as if agreeing. Outside, the moon hung high over the mansion, silver and quiet. Inside, Mara washed her hands, put away her tools, and smiled. Because deep down, she knew light doesn't need permission to shine. The governor's mansion had never been more alive than on the day of the county's annual gala. Candles burned in crystal sconces, chandeliers sparkled like captured stars, and a soft murmur of anticipation rippled through the marble halls. Every prominent figure from across the state had been invited. Mara could feel the weight of expectation pressing on her chest even before the first guest arrived. She'd spent the entire week preparing for this night. Every dish had been meticulously planned, every garnish carefully chosen. The locket lay warm against her chest as she moved through the kitchen with quiet purpose, humming the tune her grandmother had taught her. Yet beneath her calm exterior, a storm of unease churned. Tully had been unusually quiet for days. Mara had felt the tension radiating from him, sharp as broken glass. He wasn't just watching her anymore, he was waiting, calculating. And tonight, he had the chance to strike. The kitchen was a whirlwind of activity. The sous chefs chopped and stirred, the pastry cooks molded and glazed, the runners darted in and out with trays. Mara's eye scanned every station. She felt the pulse of the kitchen in her veins. She tasted sauces, adjusted seasoning, and arranged platters with meticulous care. Every movement was a silent prayer. When the first course was ready, Mara breathed a small sigh of relief. She had done all she could. The guests filed into the dining hall, laughing and exchanging greetings. The governor's wife clapped her hands lightly. Dinner will be served, she announced, and the room hushed. But Mara noticed a small, almost imperceptible shift. A tray had been tampered with. A pinch of salt where sugar belonged, a hint of spice replaced with something bitter. Her stomach clenched. Tully was behind it, she was certain. She hesitated, unsure if she could correct it without drawing attention to herself. And then she remembered her grandmother's words, when the heart listens, light answers. She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the locket's warmth seep into her chest. With trembling hands, she corrected the dishes as they were carried into the hall. The guests began tasting. At first, there were murmurs of approval. But soon, a sharp gasp cut through the murmur. One of the guests, a particularly influential senator, had bitten into a dessert and immediately set it down with a grimace. "This is spoiled," he said loudly, his voice echoing across the hall. "Who is responsible for this?" The room went silent. All eyes turned to Mara. Her heart sank. She felt the warmth of the locket against her chest, but even its glow seemed dim against the cold weight of judgment. Tully stepped forward, a small, smug smile playing on his lips. "It appears the young assistant has overstepped her skill," he said smoothly. "Perhaps she is not yet ready for the responsibilities assigned to her." Mara's hands shook, but she refused to speak. She knew arguing would only make matters worse. The senator's glare burned into her, and murmurs of disapproval began to ripple through the dining hall. Even Mrs. Ellison's face was pale with shock and embarrassment. For the first time since arriving at the governor's mansion, Mara felt true fear. She had worked so hard, followed every instinct, honored every lesson from her grandmother, and yet here she was, blamed and humiliated in front of the very people whose approval she had strived to earn. Henry, who had come to witness the gala, gave her a quick nod from the back of the hall, a silent reminder to stay calm. Mara took a deep breath. She remembered the locket, the words now etched in her mind: "What shines doesn't compete, it illuminates." With that thought, she excused herself from the room and returned to the kitchen. There, she found the tray of desserts that had been sabotaged. Her eye scanned each dish carefully. The bitterness, the imbalance, she could fix it. For the next 20 minutes, she worked frantically, tasting, adjusting, and rebuilding. Her hands were steady despite the sweat on her brow, her focus absolute. The other kitchen staff watched in awe, some too afraid to help, others inspired to do better themselves. Finally, she called for a runner. "Take these back out," she instructed softly. "Careful. Every plate must be perfect." The trays returned to the hall. Guests hesitated at first, unsure of what had changed. Then, one by one, they tasted again. Murmurs of delight began to rise. The senator's frown softened. Mrs. Ellison's eyes shone with relief. And the governor leaned back in his chair, a slow smile spreading across his face. "This," he said, "is extraordinary." The dining hall erupted in applause. Mara's cheeks burned, but she refused to smile too widely. She had learned that triumph earned in humility felt more enduring than pride gained through recognition. Yet the public humiliation had left its mark. Tully's smirk was gone, replaced by simmering resentment. He wouldn't forget this. The locket pulsed faintly against Mara's chest, as if acknowledging the toll the day had taken. Later that evening, when the hall was empty and the guests had departed, Mara stayed behind to clean and organize. She found Tully leaning against a counter, arms crossed. His eyes glinted with anger. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "You've embarrassed me today. But mark my words, one mistake, and you'll be gone." Mara met his gaze. "I don't work to compete with you," she said softly. "I work to serve well. That's all that matters." Tully said nothing more and left. Mara exhaled slowly. She felt the sting of fear, the sharpness of public judgment, but also a quiet pride in her integrity. She had faced humiliation and still chosen to act with care and purpose. She retrieved the locket from her pocket and held it close. Its warmth pulsed in time with her heartbeat. She whispered, "We made it through. I won't let anger or envy make me forget who I am." For the first time that night, she allowed herself to feel relief. She understood that success was never just about skill or recognition. It was about resilience, about staying true to your values even when the world was against you. Mara reflected on her journey, the lonely nights at the farm, the long hours in the governor's mansion, the public shame she had endured. Each moment had tested her, each challenge had been a lesson. And though the world could see only the surface, she knew the truth, that light, once kindled, could endure even through shadows. She looked out the window at the moon, silver and steady, casting its glow over the mansion gardens. Somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice, the memory of her grandmother, the pulse of the locket, reminded her. Strength isn't shown in perfection. It's revealed when you rise after the world tries to crush you. And in that moment, Mara understood something else: failure, humiliation, envy. They were not punishments, but mirrors. They reflected the strength she carried within, the light that could not be stolen, and the love that had guided her from the very beginning. She placed the locket back around her neck, feeling its reassuring warmth against her chest. She didn't need applause or validation. She only needed to remember who she was and why she cooked, to nurture, to heal, to create light in a world too often shadowed by greed and bitterness. Mara stepped out into the quiet night, the mansion silent behind her, and for the first time, she felt at peace with her place in the world. She had been tested, she had been humbled, and she had emerged stronger, not because the world had approved, but because she had not compromised herself. Sometimes, she thought, the greatest lessons come not from praise, but from the sting of public doubt. And in that lesson, there is a light that even envy cannot dim. The mansion was alive with a different kind of energy now. Word had spread of Mara's skill, her resilience, and the quiet way she had turned the governor's gala around despite sabotage. Guests whispered about the farm girl who could cook as though the food carried warmth in its soul. Staff watched her with admiration, not envy. Even Tully, now quiet and resentful, had been forced to acknowledge her talent, though he did so with a grudging nod. Mara woke that morning to the soft glow of sunlight streaming through the high kitchen windows. She stretched, feeling the familiar ache in her hands from yesterday's preparations, and touched the locket beneath her shirt. It pulsed faintly, steady and reassuring. The lessons of the past weeks, the farm, the long roads, the public humiliation, felt like threads weaving together into something stronger than herself. Henry Cole had sent word that he would visit, but Mara didn't expect him until afternoon. For now, she had the governor's breakfast to prepare, pastries for the staff, and a full menu of midday tasting samples. She moved through the kitchen with practiced grace, the locket's warmth guiding her even as the mansion hummed around her. Mrs. Ellison entered quietly, standing in the doorway. Her expression was softer now, her eyes reflecting respect. "Mara," she said, "the governor has requested your presence this afternoon. It seems he wishes to reward you formally." Mara's stomach tightened. Recognition was not her goal, but she had worked for this moment, not for fame, but to honor the gift she had been given. "Yes," she replied softly. By midday, the staff had gathered in anticipation. The dining hall shimmered under sunlight, polished to perfection. Guests arrived for a tasting session that would decide the menus for the upcoming state banquet. Mara placed each dish with care, checking every garnish, tasting every sauce. When the governor entered, he paused. His eyes swept the room, lingering on Mara. "I hear you have done wonders here," he said. "Tonight, the state's banquet may very well be remembered for years. But first," he turned to her. "You will have my attention." Mara stepped forward, her hand steady though her heart raced. "You have shown skill beyond your years, resilience beyond your training, and humility beyond your circumstance," the governor continued. "For that, I wish to honor you. Effective immediately, you will become the chief royal chef of this mansion. You will oversee every kitchen, every menu, and every dish served here." The staff gasped. Mara's cheeks warmed, and for a brief moment, she felt the weight of every challenge, the farm, the sabotage, the public shame, lift like mist. She bowed low. "Thank you, sir," she said quietly. "I will do my best." The day became a whirlwind of preparation, tasting, and coordination. Mara's mind raced, but she worked with clarity. Each plate was a reflection of the lessons she had learned: patience, heart, resilience, and the wisdom of her grandmother's voice whispering through the locket. By evening, the mansion glowed with candlelight, the grand hall transformed into a stage of elegance and anticipation. The governor and his guests tasted each dish Mara prepared, their eyes widening in delight with every bite. Conversation turned to laughter, and laughter to applause. The banquet was a triumph. Mara's dishes were remembered for their flavor, their warmth, and their unspoken honesty. After the last course, the governor stood. "Tonight, we celebrate not only a meal, but the person behind it." "Mara Cole," he said, and the room hushed, your talent and character are beyond any reward I could offer. But from this day forward, the mansion's kitchens belong to you, and with them, our gratitude and trust." Mara felt a rush of emotion but remained composed. She had not come for praise, yet she accepted it with humility, understanding that recognition was not a measure of worth but a reflection of effort and integrity. Later that evening, after the guests departed and the mansion quieted, Mara sat in her private kitchen. She unwrapped the locket and held it close. Its glow pulsed softly, a heartbeat in her palm. She thought of the farm, of Henry and his sons, of the days when she had been alone and afraid. She thought of the night she had prayed for guidance, the meals she had made in silence, and the courage it had taken to stand firm even when the world doubted her. A knock at the door drew her attention. It was Henry Cole, standing with his hands clasped, a small smile on his face. "You've done it, Mara," he said. "You've brought light to more people than you can imagine." She smiled softly, her eyes reflecting gratitude. "It was never just me," she said. "It was everything I've learned along the way, and everything I've held on to, even when it hurt." Henry nodded. "Then you deserve this. And more." Weeks later, Mara established a routine that combined duty and care. She trained new assistants, guiding them with patience and respect. She maintained the quality and warmth that had earned her recognition, teaching the value of heart, integrity, and humility in every dish. The locket remained a constant companion, a reminder of her journey and the wisdom passed down through generations. She also never forgot Henry Cole and his family. Each week, a basket of warm meals and notes traveled back to Pine Hollow. The farm, once a place of struggle and sorrow, now received nourishment and connection from the girl who had once walked its dirt paths barefoot and afraid. One quiet evening, years later, Mara found herself in the private study of the mansion, gazing at the sunset through tall windows. In her lap rested a small box. Inside was the locket, polished and carefully wrapped. Mara called her young daughter to her side. "This," she said softly, placing it in the girl's hands, "belonged to my grandmother, and before her, to my mother. It is more than a piece of jewelry. It sees what is hidden. It guides those who listen with their hearts." The girl looked into the locket, her eyes widening. Faint light shimmered in its crack, reflecting warmth back at her. She smiled. Mara kissed her forehead. "Always remember," she whispered, "your light matters. Use it wisely. Serve with your heart, even when it is hard. The world will test you, but your courage, kindness, and integrity are stronger than any fear." And with that, Mara understood the final lesson her grandmother had intended to teach her. Life is not measured by fame or wealth, but by the light you bring to others. The most powerful gift one can offer is not skill alone, but love, perseverance, and the courage to remain true to oneself, even in the face of doubt, envy, or shame. The mansion, the accolades, the recognition, they were fleeting. But the light Mara carried within, nurtured through hardship, compassion, and quiet strength, would endure. And now, through her daughter, it would continue to illuminate the world, one meal, one act of care, one heart at a time. Mara's eyes lingered on the horizon where the sun met the earth in a blaze of gold and crimson. The journey had been long, the trials fierce, yet every step had been worth it. She felt the warmth of the locket against her chest, the pulse of generations past, and the unbroken line of wisdom flowing forward. She smiled, softly, fully, and whispered, "This is only the beginning." True leadership comes from integrity, humility, and perseverance, not mere talent. Recognition is meaningful only when paired with service to others. Challenges, public judgment, and failure are opportunities to grow stronger and more compassionate. Legacy is measured not by wealth or acclaim, but by the light and values passed to future generations.